I've lived in Germany for almost 9 years now, and I still remember the exact week I realized both the postcard version and the horror story version were lying to me. Germany is not the country of perfect efficiency, trains that arrive to the second, and magazine quality life that Instagram sells you. And it's not the cold, soulless bureaucratic nightmare full of absurd rules that certain forums and Facebook groups love to repeat either. It's something quieter and stranger than both of those, and it took me years to actually see it clearly. If you want the real, unfiltered picture of life here, whether you already live in Germany or you're thinking about it, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. I only make these once a year. Almost 9 years spread across different regions. In that time, I've had chapters that felt exactly like what I dreamed about as a kid watching films set here, and stretches that ground me down in ways nobody warns you about. Mostly paperwork. And that very particular German relationship with rules. They exist, they get followed, and almost no one can fully explain to you why they're designed exactly the way they are. My only goal here is to show you what daily life actually feels like right now. Not the version that sells a relocation course, and not the version designed to scare you off. Let's start with money, because that's usually the first real question. Rent varies wildly depending on the city. In Munich or Frankfurt, a small one-bedroom can easily run from 1,000 to 1,500 euros a month, and that's before the Nebenkosten, service charges covering building maintenance, heating, water, and trash. In Berlin, it's still expensive, though slightly more manageable, but the competition is brutal. In mid-sized cities like Leipzig, Dresden, Hanover, or Nuremberg, that same apartment can drop to 550 to 750 euros. In smaller towns in the east or north, you can still find something livable for 400 to 500. Heating and electricity are their own conversation. In older buildings, which make up most of the city centers, a real German winter shows up hard on the bill. And yes, a surprising number of apartments still have single-pane windows that let in more cold than you'd like. Health insurance is genuinely one of the strongest arguments for living here. The mandatory public system, Gesetzliche Krankenversicherung, covers almost everything comprehensively. Contributions are split between employer and employee, and once you're in, a doctor's visit or a prescription rarely becomes a financial event. The quality is high and the waiting times, while sometimes long, are usually reasonable. It's one of the few areas where daily anxiety genuinely goes down after you've lived here a while. Groceries sit in a strange middle ground. Basic staples, bread, cheese, seasonal vegetables, decent beer, are affordable, and shopping at the weekly market instead of the supermarket often gets you better quality without the price jumping. But anything imported, especially Latin or Mediterranean products, gets expensive fast. Eating out, even casually, adds up quicker than people expect. A simple lunch menu in a mid-sized city center now runs 12 to 18 euros. Public transport is, overall, one of the genuine wins. In most cities it works well and runs on time. A monthly pass in a mid-sized city usually costs between 50 and 80 euros. The long-distance train network, Deutsche Bahn, is excellent when the trains arrive on time, which isn't always the case, and Germans know that perfectly well. The minimum wage is currently around 12.40 euros an hour, which for a full-time contract leaves a net of roughly 1,500 to 1,700 euros, depending on the region and your personal situation. That number isn't fictional. A meaningful chunk of the population outside the big cities actually lives close to that level. The people who build comfortable long-term lives here usually aren't relying purely on salary growth. They're benefiting from the systems around the salary. Solid healthcare, relatively strong tenant protections, 25 to 30 days of real vacation, and a network of family benefits that don't show up in a simple income comparison. Once you're actually inside a German apartment, the texture is very particular. A lot of the housing stock in city centers is old. High ceilings, wooden floors, moldings, and also narrow hallways, tiny bathrooms, and radiators that make noise. The rental process can feel demanding. You need a Schufa credit report, the last 3 months of pay slips, sometimes a guarantor, and in the big cities the competition is fierce. A lot of newcomers end up taking a less-than-ideal apartment simply because it's the one that said yes. The trade-off between location and price is constant. Live in the center of a desirable city, and you're paying a premium. Move to the outskirts or a satellite town and the rent drops. But the center becomes a daily commute, And when there's a transport strike, less frequent than in France, but it happens, that commute gets complicated. If you already live in Germany, drop one real thing in the comments that either makes you stay or makes you question it. The honest answers help more than any polished list. Safety here operates differently than the headlines suggest. Germany is, day to day, a safe country. But like anywhere, it's hyperlocal. Certain neighborhoods in certain cities carry real reputations, mostly around petty theft and pickpocketing rather than violent crime, and you learn quickly which metro lines and which hours call for a bit more attention to your bag or your phone. The daily mental load is less about danger and more about friction. Offices with impossible opening hours, forms that seem designed to confuse, and a general pace that assumes you have patience for process. The climate varies enormously by region. The north is gray and damp for long stretches. The south is more continental and, in Bavaria, even pleasant. But winter in large parts of the country means short days, real cold, and a seasonal wait that catches a lot of newcomers off guard the first year. Community is its own layered thing. The German reputation for being distant or cold has some truth to it on the surface. People generally don't strike up conversations with strangers the way some cultures do, and the path into someone's inner circle can feel slow. But once you're in, the depth is real. Dinners that last hours, friendships that assume permanence. The harder part is usually the first 2 years. A lot of expats stay clustered with other expats simply because it's easier, and the loneliness that comes from that bubble is one of the least talked about parts of moving here. Breaking into local circles, through work, through a hobby, or by genuinely committing to the language, changes the entire texture of the experience. But it asks more of you than a lot of people expect going in. So where does that leave things? The quality of life here really is high in the ways that matter day to day. Healthcare, infrastructure, transport, protected time off. But it comes wrapped in a more procedural, more rigid rhythm than a lot of people are used to. And that rhythm can feel either steadying or maddening, depending on your personality and your patience that particular week. The order is real. The bureaucracy is also real. Neither cancels the other out. The honest version of living here sits in that middle space, and it looks different depending on your income, your region, your German level, and how you personally relate to a country that moves at its own pace regardless of your plans. If this gave you something honest to think about, give it a thumbs up. It genuinely helps this reach people trying to make a real decision instead of a romantic one. Subscribe with the bell on so you don't miss the next one. And drop a comment. Tell me the real reason you stay, or the real reason you're still on the fence. Whether you live here already or you're still deciding, protect your peace and make the choice that actually fits your life. I'll see you in the next one.